Let's go through an email I received. I'm a bit confused about the terminology ACR Accessibility Conformance Report versus Accessibility Audit Report. For example, we created a template with the document title, a summary of failures, and statistics related to the findings. We follow the list of items below to report an issue. So we have issue 1, WCAG 2.1 reference, solution, audience affected, risk level. And then the question is, would the report at this stage be considered a VPAT? No, because a VPAT is a standard document. So let's go ahead and tab over to this VPAT, which is version 2.5. It's for the WCAG edition. And here I'm at the table. And so the table really is the material portion of this template. And so we're going to fill in the table to account for the accessibility. So in this first column, we have the criteria, then we have the conformance level, and then we have the remarks and explanations. So the important thing to keep in mind here is that the VPAT is a standard document. The audit report is not standardized. So, would this report at this stage be considered a VPAT? No, because you need to go and download the VPAT. So VPAT stands for Voluntary Product Accessibility Template. Then the next question is, once the issues are reported, would it be considered an audit report, or would it still fall under the ACR? So no, once you have the issues in there, if it's an audit report, it's just an audit report, because an audit report is, you can really determine what you want to include in the audit report. It's not a standard document. So audit reports usually have some commonality. So the issue would be reported, right? But then it doesn't necessarily have to. Not all audit reports include the same information. The ACR would be the completed VPAT. So once you fill in all of the applicable sections of the VPAT, then you would have an ACR. So once completed, the VPAT turns into an ACR. And then so we have this example that's given, issue 1, where we have the above information that's filled in. So WCAG 2.1 reference, solution. By the way, for any reference, I would include the actual success criteria. Solution, adjust the headings to respect the heading hierarchy, audience affected, screen reader users, and then risk level high. And then for the reference, we have H42 using H1 through H6 to identify headings. Okay, and then so this last part reads, as I understand it, in an audit report, we need to provide a more detailed solution on how to fix the issue. You don't have to do that. Again, the audit report is not standardized. So I provide an example of the audit report that we provide clients at accessible.org, but you don't have to use that report. Now, for an audit report to be useful, obviously there needs to be some information that's going to be largely common amongst other audit reports, but it's not a standard document, so it's up to you what you include. So again, it says, as I understand it, in an audit report, we need to provide a more detailed solution on how to fix the issue, including code samples and actionable feedback. This involves an in-depth accessibility assessment, especially when both compliance and user experience improvements are needed. In an ACR, we check for formal conformance to accessibility standards to prove compliance. Well, in an ACR, one other thing to keep in mind about ACRs is you don't have to have an ACR with zero accessibility issues. It's just the ACR is just a reflection of whatever the state of accessibility is. Now, usually ACRs are more favorable because people don't pay for an ACR when they knowingly have many accessibility issues. But with an ACR, it doesn't mean that you're in compliance. It doesn't mean that you are WCAG conformant. All it means is that you have an accounting of the accessibility. So your accessibility doesn't need to be one way. It's just a reflection of the state of accessibility. So yeah, with an ACR, so the other part of this is that an audit underlies the ACR. You can't have a resulting ACR unless you have an audit first, because with an audit, we're going to find the issues. Now, an audit is more detailed, but if I'm someone who's procuring an ACR, commonly referred to as a VPAT, And by the way, let's just go ahead and explain the difference one more time to be clear. A VPAT is the template. It's just the document. It doesn't, there's nothing filled in. Once it's populated, once it's completed, all of the applicable details are filled in, then you're going to have the resulting ACR. So an ACR is a result of the VPAT being completed. The terms are used interchangeably, usually in the sense that people refer to VPAT when they're really saying they want an ACR, because a VPAT, anybody can get a VPAT right now and download it. I think it's off the ITIC.org website. So, and that stands for Information Technology Industry Council, I believe. But you don't. You can download the template right now. So that's all. That's all it is the template. Then once we've completed, then we have the ACR. That's what people are really after. But to have an ACR, we need to audit the digital asset, because if we don't audit it, then we don't know what to fill in. So if you are getting an ACR, you might as well get the audit along with it from the service provider, because otherwise it doesn't really make sense to only ask for the ACR, because the ACR is not going to be as detailed as the audit. So the audit's going to be more helpful in helping you fix the actual accessibility issues. The ACR is just really the accounting of it. Now, you're probably going to get some elaboration in that ACR. So if you are non-conformant with a given criterion, and it doesn't just have to be the web content accessibility guidelines, there are other standards in play. But if you do not support a given criterion, then there's an elaboration. So as I showed earlier, when we tabbed over to the actual VPAT, there's a remarks and explanations column. So, and this is for the WCAG version. And then there's a conformance level. But there are more details that we can add, but this is just not going to rise to the level of detail in an audit, because with an audit, really here, this is a report that is designed to be actionable so that the digital asset owner operator can take action and remediate those issues, so they can locate the issues and they can fix those issues. So there is some distinction here, but these documents are related. So that's where the audit comes into play. That's where the role the VPAT plays, and then the resulting ACR. So if you are looking to get an ACR, you definitely want that audit. You want both documents, and they should be provided. So the ACR is probably going to make it the cost an additional amount. But either way, it could be rolled all into one service. But either way, that's what you need to think about here when you're talking about a VPAT and an ACR. So you're not going to create your own VPAT. You might create your own ACR, but an ACR is always going to be most valuable if you have an independent third party issue it, because procurement agents are going to ask. Most of them will ask, "Where did you get this? Who issued you this?" And if you've issued it to yourself, it just doesn't carry nearly the weight, because obviously there's bias and there's the tendency to overlook accessibility issues, or to think, oh well, we'll take care of those in this next update, so those will be resolved. So we'll go ahead and leave those blank. So it really just doesn't have the integrity that it would as if it was issued by a reputable third party provider. Now, you also do want to make sure that you are getting an ACR that is issued by a reputable provider. So non-reputable providers would obviously include overlay widget sellers, just because they're selling widgets. So right, so you want to go through a reputable digital accessibility company for that. But this is how you look at the audit report versus the VPAT versus the ACR. So hopefully this clears up some confusion. But yes, many people, this is why I talk about the terminology and making sure that you use the correct terminology, because it can get confusing, especially when you get into VPATs and ACRs, because it's like people are saying they're asking for a VPAT, but then if they're asking for a VPAT, what does that make the ACR? And then also where does an audit fit into this? And then if you start mangling the word audit and conflating it with user testing and scans, this can get really confusing really fast. So this is how to think about an accessibility conformance report versus your audit report. Just remember, the audit report, it's really going to be up to the person that's creating the report what's included in this. There is some information that typically is associated with a good audit report, but it doesn't necessarily need to be there. Okay, and this answers the email. And if you need help with an ACR, I will include a link to accessible.org in the description.